time I've ever spoken from this bima was actually at my father's memorial service. So it's really very emotional to be here, be able to speak, and thank you very much indeed, Rabbi, for inviting me here to say a few words, especially about the relationship between the Chazan and my father. Their relationship was really amazing. They were a wonderful team. If needs be, they could take on each other's roles at very short notice. I must say that in comparison, although my dad's accuracy was technically equal to George's, his conveying the relevant mood for prayer was just about good enough. Whereas George was perfect, absolutely perfect at the latter. He had the voice, but he also preached a great sermon. Indeed, they honed each other's skills and learned very much from each other. A section in the Shulchan Aruch, Orech Chaim 531, is devoted to the qualities ideally required for a chazan. He should be, amongst other things, a modest man and acceptable to the people for whom he deputizes, and he should have a pleasant voice. George was such a man, but to be fair, George had much more than a pleasant voice, a wonderful, magnificent, effortless one. If such a paragon is not to be found, this source adds that the man chosen should be the most pious and feared of the congregation. It then became customary for the rabbi to act as secondary prayer leader. George and my father gladly took on the responsibility of ensuring that when necessary, they would be able to substitute for each other. Indeed, George could give a powerful sermon, and indeed often did so, even expertly taking both roles, as David said, when they went to America, when my parents went to America for several months on sabbatical. George often came round to our house for tea on Shabbat afternoons before lunch, and both he and my dad would be absorbed in deep Torah discussions. I'm sure a little bit of tittle-tattle did get in, judging by the laughter. We knew to keep quiet if in the same room, although I did occasionally sit in with the conversation and witness their absorbing intellectual sparring, often joined by Adi Wittenberg, Rabbi Jonathan's father. It was the understanding and great appreciation of each other's skills, thirst for learning, and being challenged that made them the greatest of friends. I must admit that personally, after just a few years attending and being very involved in this fantastic, wonderful shul, it was a wrench to leave and to have to move north. As to me, the combination of both rabbi and chazan that I loved and loved to hear could not be beat. George was so perfect in his renditions that even though a few of us young marrieds left the New London and set up New North London, George's perfection for mood, accent, time, place, overall spirituality and decorum were a real incentive for trainee NNS Chazan Leslie Linden Zichronah Livracha to learn and get it right. And for many years, the familiarity of New London services we continued. But I must admit, having grown up with service perfection, I became frustrated when participation is seen, as often the case elsewhere, as more important than having a real Shaliach Tzibur who has learned the hard way, who you have confidence in and so inspires you to daven, instead of hoping that the performance would be all right on the night. But I suppose that complaining is a generation thing, keeping us oldies going. Apologies to anyone here for this view that is the result of our being meticulously led in prayer and never forgotten by George. It is well noted that a Chazan's sweet singing could become more popular than a learned rabbi's preaching, but most attempts at curbing the exuberance of a prayer leader were doomed to failure. Many Chazanim seemed to be attracted by their own voice, but George always sang to uplift and would never unduly prolong a service. The decorum and formality that George and my dad set out to maintain has set the scene for all the Masorti UK synagogues. Michael Milston, Zichrono Livracha, a great fan of our then Rabbi and Chazan, wrote many words about this community. He rightly saw that Rabbi Jacobs relied on my mother as Rebbitzin. Michael wrote, Rabbi Jacobs also had another partner of 35 years, the emeritus cantor of the New London, George Rothschild, whose knowledge of Nusach, the correlation between the linguistic and musical meaning of the words, is renowned. Added to this, his voice, Hebrew pronunciation, and knowledge of the traditional ways of Jewish worship, much of which emanates from his own yeshiva background, made his partnership with Louis Jacobs one of the essential ingredients that contributed to the New London's particular spiritual ambience. Have you ever known, Rabbi Jacobs asks rhetorically, that a rabbi and a chazan should work together for 35 years and not have a single argument? That's very true. But my brother David tells me when my dad got very anxious when George did not turn up for a marriage service that he took alongside my dad, so Dad had to step in, only for George to turn up halfway through, as he had forgotten that the clocks went forward. David said that Dad said nothing to George, just shrugged his shoulders, happy George was okay. It is so fitting that Chazan George is buried, as David said, next to my parents, and Chazan Stephen Kotzen. I'm sure they will never be forgotten and will bring harmony, as we've heard today and will continue hearing as today at this wonderful gathering.
Sure.